right, so welcome back to another episode, Life's Hidden Curriculum. I'm here with my wife, Meg,
Hi.
and today we're going to talk about a topic that we both have some experience with, and it's one that is I don't know, I can't say it's common, but I was surprised to hear that there are more people that face this than I thought, and also the different types of it. So today we're going to talk about homelessness. We're also going to talk about our first apartments and first jobs and that first kind of transition from, all right, I'm either at home or I'm at school, but now I'm like living on my own, and kind of some of the stuff that comes along with that. So for our young adults, this is probably a great listen, but also for some of our teens who are curious or worried about that phase, I think this would be beneficial as well.
Mhm.
Oh, and this is kind of picking up a conversation we started a little bit earlier today. So just brief cliff notes if you don't want to listen to the whole episode, which you should. But if you don't, both my wife and I have experienced different types of homelessness. She experienced some when she was younger, when she was living with her mom, and they were kind of going through different transient types of housing. And then I experienced it once I left, technically at like two occasions. So once I graduated from college and I started my first job, I experienced homelessness. But then also after I left that job for a period, I experienced homelessness. So we're going to kind of get into that a little bit. So, Maggie, let's talk your experience from your youth.
Okay. So my story starts about as far back as I can remember, which I think I was maybe 3 or 4 years
Hmm.
old at the time. I was living with my mom, my older sister, and my mom's boyfriend at the time, who I think she was actually maybe married to, which I found in my pursuit of like ancestry research. And my earliest memories that I can recall as an adult are from this time in my life. We
Okay.
had lived in a town in northeastern Pennsylvania called Pottsville. We lived in part of Pottsville that was called the projects, which I'm assuming meant like public housing. And the guy she was with was abusive. And being only like 3 or 4 at the time, I'm not sure if I remember all these details correctly. And sometimes my older sister will fill in the gaps or correct things. Like
Mm,
sometimes I mix memories together,
mm,
um, or just have like the details wrong or whatever. But what I recall is this one night in particular, my sister and I were sitting on a chair watching TV, and my mom and her boyfriend were on the couch, and she was eating a salad from, she must have got it at a store because it was like one of those clamshells, and I think she was using a plastic knife.
your mom
Yeah.
is okay.
Yeah. And they had some kind of verbal argument, and I presume it became physical because the next thing I remember was the blanket that was hanging on the back of the chair was over our heads, which my sister said she had done. She'd put it over our heads because I guess she knew what was about to happen and didn't want me to see it.
Jesus.
But it was actually a blanket my great grandmother had knit. It was called an Afghan. And so the knit is sort of loose and you can still see through it. So I didn't see what he did to her. Apparently he punched her on the couch. And what I did see was her pick up her fork and stab it into his eye, the fork from the salad. And he started screaming. I don't really remember. Like, I always thought the story was that we fled from the house that night, but my sister said we actually didn't. And it wasn't until sometime later, it was some other issue that had led us to leave. But we did end up leaving sort of like in secret. Like, he didn't know we were leaving when we
Okay.
did. So what I do remember is we spent at least a night, maybe a couple of nights in the car in the woods. So in Schuylkill County, in this part of Pennsylvania, there's a lot of like roads or trails that go through the woods that get to old coal mining sites. And a lot of these old coal mining sites would leave huge pits in the ground,
Yeah.
enormous pits that would fill with rainwater, natural water, or whatever. And then it would become like a swimming hole, and people would go and swim in these waters.
Dirty motherfucker.
And so we were like on one of these trails, I think, in the woods, in the car. And I remember like at least one like flash of a memory of being there in the dark.
Mm,
So I think we were there for a night. I don't know if we were there for more. And then the part of the story that I don't remember that got filled in for me later was my grandfather, my mom's father, had
mm,
become aware of what happened. And I think he got us hooked up with, what was it called? Like a women and children like
Shelter.
domestic violence shelter kind of place. Yeah. While he looked for somewhere for us to live. And we were there for a couple of weeks, I want to say.
Mhm.
Couple weeks probably. And then he ended up helping my mom get an apartment, and that was the next place that we lived. And we were in that place for not even a year, I don't think, maybe a year. And then we moved on to the next place after that. That's basically like the story from my childhood, not having a place to live for I'm not sure how long when we were in the car. And then I remember being in the shelter for several nights. That was like a big kind of learning curve for
Mhm.
me. One of the things that I really remember about this shelter, it's the weirdest thing. They didn't have bathtubs, and I didn't know how to take a shower yet.
Mm. Yeah, that could be
And
interesting.
yeah, and, like, you know how we've gone through that with our son,
Right.
like, put your head back so the shampoo doesn't go down in your
Right.
face. I could not get this concept. He got it from
That's why you takes long showers now. You're probably in there struggling.
and one of like, it's so weird, like, I guess the innocence of a child, like, the way that you experience things through your own lens and you don't fully grasp, like, the gravity of the situation. It didn't really, like, occur to me that we were in a shelter because, like, there were other kids there and I was playing with them and, like, there was staff that tried to make it, like, normal enough for us. Like, we had little, like, school sessions and, like, we would have homework and stuff. One of the things that I remember about the shower was there was no bathtub, so I had to learn how to wash my hair in the shower, and I could not get this concept of putting my head back, and the shampoo would get in my eyes, and I'd start screaming and crying. And so, like, for me at, like, 3 or 4 years old, that was, like, the most painful experience of this, was that they didn't have a bathtub, and I was getting the shampoo in my eyes. But anyway, so yeah, so that's that. I wouldn't say there was more homelessness, but there was definitely instability. Like that first apartment that we got into after that situation, the guy found us there. And once he found us, he tried to break in, he tried to smash windows, he did damage my mom's car, smashed the windows in the car. I think he thought maybe the keys to the house were in the car or something. I'm not sure or he was just being vindictive, I guess. But he found us there. And so then we had to leave again. And so we kind of always felt scared, like how many times are we going to have to move until he leaves us alone? Luckily, we got into the next place, which was in the same town as my grandfather. And I think maybe that scared him enough
Okay.
because my grandfather could be very threatening.
You don't.
Very threatening. So maybe the proximity to him in that town was enough to scare the guy from like not trying to find us there.
Mhm.
Or maybe he did and I'm just not aware of it, because I wasn't told everything. But I do remember having this fear of like everywhere we go, we can only stay until he finds us. Luckily, that next place in the town where my grandfather was that was the last place that we lived. So that's the early child events that I can recall. Now my older sister, prior to my memories in the town in Pottsville, she and my mom, before I was born or before I have memories of it, had lived in numerous places, numerous different places. She was like constantly moving, but it was like a similar thing of either she was running from rent or getting evicted or running from people she owed money to because she was into drugs. Like that was kind of the
Yeah.
basis of this whole thing as a kid. My mom was doing drugs. And so she was like either running from people she owed money to or I guess trying to evade police by constantly having new addresses or whatever. But yeah, my older sister unfortunately had it a lot worse where she would have been in about third or fourth grade by the time we lived in Pottsville. And so from her early childhood until about third or fourth grade, she had been in like 12 or 13 different schools.
God, that's brutal.
Yeah. So fortunately, that didn't happen to me. I was in I think two schools. But so then the other part of my story is fast forward to adulthood. So a little bit of background of the interim. I went to college, not terribly far from where I grew up. And then I went to medical school in Western Pennsylvania. And then I went to my residency training in New Jersey, and then I did fellowship training in Philadelphia. So from the time of college through medical school, I was on either grants, like scholarships and grants and that kind of thing, or loans. Mainly med school was all loans. So that was keeping me afloat. And I had worked a little bit, so I had some money saved up, but definitely not enough to like live. And I did get some help from my grandparents, but like it wasn't like they would help when they could. But it wasn't like I wasn't just like paid, not everything was paid for. So I was using loans for med school. And then it must have been money I had left over from the loans that let me get the first apartment after I graduated, the first apartment for residency. And then once you become a resident, you start getting a paycheck. So then once I could accumulate some money there, then I was using that money. what happened was, at the end of residency, before I was leaving New Jersey to come to Philadelphia for my fellowship training, so the school loans work in such a way where you can defer your payments until you like have a job, like after all your training is done. But you have to remember to do this form every year.
Mm.
And I had done the form to defer, but in like the chaos of getting ready to move, like applying to all these fellowship programs, running around the whole like northeastern part of the country to interview for these programs, which is very expensive, and the applicant has to pay all those fees. Like nobody reimburses that. And then, getting accepted, getting ready to move and all this stuff, I forgot to do the form. So if you forget to do the form, then they automatically kick in the full payment, which was like basically what I was making in a month as a resident. So I had a little bit of money in my checking account and enough money in my savings account to pay for the movers and all this, like the security and deposit, and all the stuff that I needed for my first month.
Uh-huh.
I used all that money to pay for all that stuff. And then the money that I had left over was about $150 more than this payment that the loaner took, the lender
Mhm.
took out of my account because I forgot to do the form. So the first payment that they took was the month that I was moving. And right before I moved, I had literally like $150 in my account. And I still had to like furnish my apartment, of course, buy groceries and all this stuff. And like you don't get your first paycheck and everything. Like they like hold the first one and
Right.
yeah. So like there was going to be a lag. I think I was going to get maybe one more paycheck from residency because they did the same thing. Like they hold the first paycheck and then you get it like later at the end. But other than that, like I was not going to have income for a little bit. So when I arrived to Philadelphia, I had $150.
But you broke ass.
So I only had like whatever furniture I already had, which was a bed and like I had a camping chair.
Mhm.
Yeah. What else? I had a coffee table
Okay.
and I think that was it.
Sounds about right.
I think that was it. And the only thing that and here was the other thing. So my credit card that I got a credit card in college. That credit card was maxed out from all of the interviewing. So the interview season is really difficult because you have to pay for everything. You have to pay for your travel. So if you're applying somewhere that requires a flight, you have to pay for the flight. Like the program that you're applying to doesn't like offer to
Nothing.
pay for anything. Sometimes they'll help with like a discount for a hotel room, but that's it. So I had to pay for all the travels, all the hotel accommodations, the food and everything. And these interview trips are not just like a day trip. Like they're far enough away that you want to like get there the day before
Mm.
because the day's going to start at like 7 or 8 a.m. So you have to travel in the day before, which is travel in a hotel, do the whole interview day, which is typically the whole day. And then sometimes there's even another day, like either the night before the interview or the night of the interview or the night or something like the next day. If it's a weekend, they're going to have some like extra meal. Like they will host you for like a dinner with the current residents or a brunch with the residents or whatever. Sometimes if they're really interested in you, the program director will meet you for like an extra like breakfast or whatever. And typically that meal they'll pay for, but everything else you have to pay for. So it could be like typically it's like at least a 2-night trip, if not 2 or 3 nights, depending on how far away you have to travel.
Sounds like a conference.
It's a lot. And this is just for one interview. And then typically you're going to interview at like, they say to try at least 10 to get to at least
10?
10 interviews. And you have a few months to do all this. So it's a huge cost. And I had to put all this cost on my credit card. And so the interview season is like in the winter, like I want to say like November to like March or
Mhm.
so. And then I was moving in June. So my credit card had been maxed out from all this. So I came to Philly, maxed out credit card, couldn't use it. $150 to my name. I had maybe one more paycheck coming, which was going to be not even enough to pay 1 month of the new rent that I had in Philly. And the only other thing that I had was a Target credit card, which for some reason, Target was very generous in my credit limit. And so I had enough on my Target credit card to buy groceries to get me set up in the new apartment. I bought a TV and that was kind of, maybe I bought some clothes. I don't think I bought clothes. I don't remember, but that was kind of it. And I had to I could only have things that I could get at Target until I got myself settled, like back on my feet. And it had been, I want to say like a couple of months at least before I even had a couch in the apartment. I had 2 camping chairs because I remember my friend would come over and we would sit in the camping chairs and watch TV.
And this the apartment I met you in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I had already met you by the time I bought that couch.
You had to, because I don't remember camping chairs in your living.
No, I feel like we met in September of that first year. And I feel like when we met, I don't know if I had the couch yet. Yes, I did. I did
You
have the
had
couch.
to have.
Yeah, I did have the couch. But it took a while to get the couch. I was on the camping chairs for a good bit.
You do it. Won't he do it?
Yeah, but I mean, I had the bed. The bed was a huge plus to have.
That is a necessity, yeah.
That was a huge plus. I had this old dresser also. I had
Mhm.
this old dresser that somebody had donated to me. And that was about it. That was like really just about all I had in that apartment
Just
for
bumming it.
like basically the entire summer until I could get back on my feet. And there was even, I think, yeah, it was in that first year, I was Ubering. So I was
Mhm.
a full-time fellow,
Mhm.
with like a 40 to sometimes 60 or 80-hour week. Not usually 80 because in that particular program we didn't take call.
Mm.
But I was working long days and the pay, unfortunately, was a pay cut from my residency program in New Jersey, but my rent was more expensive. And so I had to Uber to make extra money because I wasn't eligible for moonlighting yet. So I was a fellow learning to be a child psychiatrist in Philly and wasn't making ends meet with my income. So I was Ubering. And I Ubered for a while, a few months I was Ubering. And that money was okay. I mean, it helped. It helped kind of make ends meet, but I wasn't able to save money. Like all the
Right.
money I was making, I had to spend. And it really wasn't until I became eligible to moonlight, which means I was allowed to pick up extra shifts, like acting sort of like an attending at a job.
You just extra shifts.
Yeah, well, but it's not extra shifts like in the fellowship program. Like it's not part of the training. It's just like separate. Like you're kind of operating under your own license at that point.
Mm.
It wasn't until then that I was able to really ramp up my savings and like really get back on my feet.
Mm.
That whole experience took a full year
Mm.
from the time I moved in end of June, early July, that first year in Philly until like June of the next year.
Mm.
Because I wasn't eligible to moonlight until maybe January, something. So from January to June, and there's not a lot of space to take shifts. Like it's not like I was just working all the time.
Right.
Like I can only work maybe a couple of weekends a month or something. So it took
Mm.
time to accumulate that income. But yeah, that was an interesting year.
Sounds like.
Interesting.
So for me, um, when I left high school, I had accepted Philadelphia University as well I was going to go to. I was very excited. I had never even been to Philadelphia before an SO, which is new student orientation. So not familiar with Philadelphia at all. I just knew I got accepted and I was coming up here. I didn't really know anybody. The only contact I had in Philadelphia was the ex-fiance of my aunt. So, Auntie Pam's, like,
Mm.
somebody had proposed to her and they kind of broke it off. That was the only connection I had to Philadelphia whatsoever. And he lived out like Drexel Hill. So not even really technically Philadelphia.
Mm.
Drexel Hill is like, if you go down, I want to say City Line. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, you go like way down City Line and it changes into something else and you're like just a different part, but it's like suburb-ish outside of Philly. So anyway, turn to the Township Line Road, all this kind of other shit, right? So I go through school, and as I'm in school, like I never lived off campus. I knew people that did, but like I was always on campus, like for the entire time I was in school. I love school so much, it took an extra 2 years. By the time I graduated,
By choice.
well, sure, whatever. um No, I made stupid ass mistakes in college and ended up having to retake some classes, but then also I fell behind in terms of like my credits. So in order for me to graduate, I had to have so many credits. But the program I was in, you have to sequentially take certain classes. So if I didn't pass a class or if I dropped a class, then I'd have to wait until like that same semester the following year. Like the design classes go by semester. So you'd get like design 1, design 2, design 3, design 4, and it'd be like fall, spring type deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't always offer like a makeup over the summer. If I like, let's say I dropped out of design 3 in the fall, there's no guarantee that they're going to offer design 3 the following summer, but that also means I can't take design 4 in the spring. So if I drop out of design 3, which I feel like I might have, if I drop out of design 3 in the fall, I have to wait until next year, the next following fall, to take design 3 again.
Mm-hmm.
It was anyway. So I say all that to say, I ended up on campus the entire time. And I was a pain in the ass with the administration there, I'm sure, because at one point I was a staff person, so I had guaranteed housing. And so I was able to like kind of be on campus early and kind of be involved in that entire helping to move young people in, new college students. But then I was also, I forget how that happened, but I didn't continue doing that. And I forget why. I'm sure one of my friends can remind me, but I was no longer doing that. But at the same time, like I had a little pull, little connections. And so I would like always like exhaust that to the fullest extent that I possibly could to be like, can you guys give me housing? And I was like, rooming with friends and all sorts of other shit. So anyway, graduation comes, and I get this job out in New Jersey. And I remember I had only been in New Jersey like once or twice, but never like done anything significant out there, like lived out there or anything like that. And this was my first like apartment, my first opportunity to like live on my own. And my first real job, salary job. I remember getting the phone call. I was in the lobby of the athletics building that I was working in over summertime. And they offered me the position and I was ecstatic. And the crazy part is I was talking to Kevin about this too. My salary they were offering was like 40K. And I was just like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I was gassed. I was like, yo, this shit is crazy. Not accounting for inflation or anything like that. I just felt like that was more than enough. And I was super humbled because I was also getting a job in a field that I didn't have a formal education on. Like it was all experience based. And it was my reputation that helped get me this job as an assistant athletic director. So fresh out of college, most people are like working their way up into like, they'll do an internship maybe somewhere, and then maybe they'll bounce and do another internship somewhere else. And then maybe they'll become like a grad extern. So they're taking graduate school courses to get their master's while they're like working at the job. And then if a position opens up, then they might slide in as like, an assistant coordinator or like an operations management type role, whatever. And then eventually they'd work themselves up to get into like an assistant athletic director position. So I went from literally being a work study, like a college student with a job on campus, to being an assistant athletic director, my first job. So I skipped a bunch of steps. And it was a blessing. I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity and everything. But when I got there, again, not having a support system, not having anybody, not having a network or anything like that, I didn't have like you mentioned, having savings, credit card. I didn't have any of that. I literally just had, and I think one other thing before I get to that, one thing that you didn't mention that I think is important is that you had a car.
When I came to Philly?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had a car.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have anything. I didn't have
Yeah.
a mode of transportation. I remember, my homie Kev drove me up to Jersey. I'll never get this. Drove me up to Jersey. And this was like, to date myself, we were talking about the merits of Drake. Drake had just came out. We were talking about, is Drake really good? Like, I don't know. Like, and this was like, Thank Me Later just came out.
Mm.
His first album. And we're like, I don't know. I'm not really feeling it. And, Kev is a big Jay-Z guy. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. It feels like he's like talking to women a lot, which hasn't changed in all these years. So anyway, I remember I had my stuff in his trunk and in his car, and then it was just like dropping me off. And then I remember that feeling of when he was leaving, I was like, I'm by myself in this different place, and I didn't know anything. Like I knew I had a job. I knew who the contact people were for that. But now I was like on my own in a very unfamiliar space and place with like nobody. And not like, it's not like I knew anybody that was at this college that I was going to start working at, the following Monday. Didn't know anything. Like I remember my wardrobe consisted of, I had like Dickies, like khaki colored Dickies. I had like a couple pairs in a couple different colors, and had like a gray, a black, and like two khaki, some polos, um, and like a vest, like a knit vest, and like some dressier clothes. But like I didn't have what I would say is like I wasn't ready. I wasn't like groomed in terms of like your first day on like a real job. But I knew all the stuff I needed to know to do the job. But again, not having a support system, I was fortunate enough that the university I was at, they had like on-campus housing for guests and visitors of the school.
Is that where Kev dropped you off at?
Yeah.
Mm.
So like in the parking lot of this place. And I remember it was like it was a temporary thing, and it was the space was like a little mini hotel, and a lot of college universities have this for like parents that are visiting from like out of town and they need to like stay a night or something like that, and they're gonna like do like the whole campus tour and all that kind of stuff. Or if they have like, you know, big donors or board of trustees, or if they're doing something on campus and they want to be able to house people that are going to be coming in, you know, if you're like if you're having a conference and you have like a keynote speaker or something like that. Right. So I had I asked, you know, very nicely and politely, and they were able to kind of hook me up for like a week. And during that week, I had, you know, I was working the entire time, and then I was looking for places to live. Now, it should be noted that where I was Lakewood, New Jersey. It's, you know, one of the largest Hasidic Jewish enclaves or whatever in the country. And not familiar or having been exposed to those type of people and that community, I really didn't know what to expect. But what I found is that like very closed off. And this is when I started realizing things about like blockbusting and redlining and all these different things, because I would walk past like apartment complexes and there's no information about leasing or phone numbers to call for like leasing agents or anything like that. But I would see like apartments available, but there's no directional like how to get to the leasing office or anything like that. I'm walking through one apartment kind of complex, if you will. You know, it's like a main road that goes through it. So it's like apartments on one side, apartments on the other side. And because I didn't have a car, I'm fast forwarding a little bit once I got the apartment, but I remember I would walk to work, and I remember like the kids would be out, like little Jewish kids would be out, and they would look at me and just like stare, like as I'm walking down the street. And again, this is like 8.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, having born and raised in Detroit, living in North Carolina, I wasn't unfamiliar with like, you know, that type of look. But it was like they were looking at me again as children, like they had never seen me before, never seen a black person before ever in their life.
Yeah. In 2008, like I could see having that experience in earlier times, you know,
I remember like
but
there was
like,
like a ball had like rolled into the sidewalk or something as I'm walking. And I remember I
mm,
picked it up and handed it to the kid, and they just
mm,
like wouldn't take it.
really?
Yeah, they were just like paralyzed with fear.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. I'm just gonna set this down. And I like reached over the side of the fence and like dropped it over there. I was like, I'm just gonna put that over there, and I just kept it moving. So going back to my first my housing situation, I wouldn't characterize myself as being homeless at that point because I had a place to like put my stuff. But once that week was up and I was like dreading it the entire time I was working, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't like my friends. They don't have any money, right? And I can't like go back to Philly because I was like 90 minutes away from Philadelphia. And you know, maybe it was part of it was pride. I really can't say, but I genuinely didn't know what to do. Didn't know where to go. Had like no idea. So I remember when that day came, I just like put all my stuff in my office, and I'm trying to remember if they said I couldn't stay in housing, if it was a weekend or the week, but whatever it was, I remember I slept in my office one night, the
Mm-hmm.
first night. And then housekeeping came in and they were like, like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? I was like, nothing. I'm just working. I just started my first week, so I just want to kind of catch up on some stuff. And, you know, like, well, you can't sleep in here. I was like, no, it's fine. I'm just getting some stuff done. Like, no big deal. Like, don't worry about it. I'll lock up. Da 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 da. Naturally, they told security. Security, you know, tells the office, and then they're kind of talking to me like, you know, just mind you, you can't really stay. You know, you can't sleep in your office. I was like, I understand that, but I'm gonna be full transparency. Like, I'm trying to find somewhere to go, and I'm looking around. Like, I don't really know. You're like, well, have you thought about like, you know, living in brick or like, and I'm like, bro, I don't have a car.
And how far is that from the town you were in?
Probably like a 15-20 minute drive
If you had a car?
if I had a car. But
Mm-hmm.
where I was living in Lakewood, New Jersey, this is how crazy the transportation system was. I remember there was a bus that came down, I think it was Route 9, and that was like the major road that went through Lakewood. That bus, it was a New Jersey Transit, and that bus could take me down the street to a Target, but then it also finished in Philadelphia, the Greyhound station. So it wasn't like a SEPTA bus where it was like just in the area, like loop around and shit. This was like a regional bus.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't as though
Not for
like,
like daily commuting, in
no,
other
like
words.
people had to do it, but it wasn't, I mean, it was literally like built like a Greyhound bus, like a SEPTA bus. So it was like, it wasn't very reliable. And it's not something you just like take and like, oh, let me hop on this, hop on that. It was like, it was it was not ideal for what I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
It's not something where it's like I can just get like a trans pass and just be like hop on the bus type deal. Because God forbid, like I miss a stop, I'm in a whole different part of the region. It's not like, oh, let me just hop off this bus and wait 10 minutes, another bus is coming the opposite direction. So I remember I worked some stuff out. I talked to some of my new colleagues to kind of let them know what my situation was. One guy lived out in Red Bank, also too far, it was like 40 minutes away. And, you know, he had a kid. I think he had just had his first. And so he just really didn't have a situation that worked. And my other colleague was kind of similar to my situation. She had come from Texas. And she was living on her own and she lived kind of a ways. And so I stayed on her couch maybe once or twice. And then I remember I talked to my aunt about it and she sent me some money and I stayed in a hotel a couple of nights. But like literally during this time, mind you, I had a full-time job, but like you were saying, they kind of hold your first check. And so that particular spot, I think I got paid every month. And so
My God.
once I
It's the worst.
I know. Once I
So
once I
you're not going to
started
get it
there,
until the end of the next month.
right,
So
but
you're
that
basically working for at least 2 months with no paycheck yet.
yeah, so I think what happened is there was a conversation that was had and they were able to cut me my first check. It wasn't a full check, but at least they cut me my first check. And with that, I was able to at least put like a down payment on this one particular unit. And I'll never forget. It was like it was managed by like a property management company.
Mm-hmm.
So I never saw the landlord or met the landlord or anything. But I remember I found a phone number, I called them, and we set up like an interview or whatever. And that was a strange thing too. And set me up with this unit, which was a nice little 1 bedroom. And I remember I let them know my situation was, and they were like, all right, cool, no problem. I was able to move in. I put my down payment down. I had enough at that point to have like a first, last, and everything. And I think part of it was my paycheck. Another part of it was like the money I'd gotten from Auntie Pam. And moved in, and just like you, I think I just had one captain's chair, and I feel like I had an entertainment center, or I bought an entertainment center. But here's what I do know: I didn't have a bed. I remember I had a blow up mattress, and it had a leak.
Oh my God.
And so I remember having to run it all night long, and the leak got progressively worse to the point where I had ran it, and when I woke up, it was still flat.
Mhm.
My back was on these wooden pallets that I actually found in the dumpster area of the apartment unit that I was staying in.
Oh my God.
Cause I was like, I can't sleep on the floor. I forget exactly what it was, but it was something like because my sheets and everything like were not, my blanket was like too big. So my blanket was basically on the floor. And I just like, I'm freaking out. Like I don't want to sleep on the floor. And so, yeah, it was a very annoying and humbling experience to have to go through. But yeah, I was homeless for like at least three weeks or so because I was able to stay on campus in their little guest area for about a week. Then I was in between a hotel and a colleague's couch for like another week. And then a week after that, I was able to get back onto the housing on campus. And then I think after that, I got my check and I was able to like sort that out. And yeah, like when I moved in, it was a captain's chair, which is like one of those foldable, collapsible chairs. You see it like barbecues and sporting events, tailgates. And then I had this air mattress that had a slow leak in it. And I got those wood pallets. I got 2 wood pallets that I found. And at some point shortly after that is when I found out I had bed bugs. And so and this was me being resourceful. Remember not having much money. Excuse me. I was heavy on Craigslist when I At some point, I wasn't able to take all of my things off campus with me. So when Kevin dropped me off, that was just some of my stuff. The remainder of my stuff, I'll never forget this too. I had left in a parking garage on campus, and I had this agreement with athletics that like I could like leave my stuff there until I came back and got it. Because again, I was living on campus
Just
housing.
like out in the open of a parking
Yeah,
garage? Like anybody could come and take it?
they could, yeah. But I didn't. I
Oh.
didn't have any other choice. So I left the stuff there. I got a U-Haul, drove back the
So
90
your stuff was
minutes.
still there.
Most of it, yeah. Because here's what
Most of it.
happened. Here's this really like made me mad. I had this Ninja Turtles blanket. Now this sounds trivial, right? But this was like my childhood. It's like comforter, Ninja Turtles blanket. This blanket had survived Live 8, if you remember, or Live 8. I always forget what it is. But this massive concert that only happens like every 8 years or whatever. And it come to Philadelphia. I remember I took this blanket with me with some friends, and we went and we were by like the main. The concert was on the steps of the art museum, and that one big fountain that's like there,
Mm.
we were that close.
Uh-huh.
Despite it was like over 1 million people at this concert
You were at the
on the
fountain?
Parkway. Yeah,
That's
we were
pretty
like at
close,
the
yeah.
fountain, and this little Ninja Turtle blanket was holding down the fort.
Yeah.
And I remember I had like washed it in the athletic department with their like machine industrial size like washer and dryer and everything. And for whatever reason, that just like that walked one day, and like almost like I had put the Ninja Turtle blanket on top of everything to kind of cover everything. And then when I came back to pick it up, that was gone. That was missing. I was like,
Mm.
"Hey, any idea where my blanket is?" I was like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Fuck it." So annoyed.
It could have blown away in the wind.
No, like it was in a parking garage. It was like in a parking spot in a parking garage. So like it was no blowing
Isn't that
away.
open to the air?
Yeah, but it's like in a parking garage. It's not like it wasn't like at the top where like the wings just blow. Like if it blew anywhere, it would just be in a
Mm.
corner somewhere.
Okay.
But whatever. So I remember I drove, picked up my stuff, and this is how bad the situation was. So I drove. My coworker dropped me off at the U-Haul spot, which was 1.5 miles from where I lived, at least. To the U-Haul spot, picked up the U-Haul, drove to Philly, picked up my things. I stopped at a spot that was giving away 2 couches. One had a queen size pullout, the other was like an oversized love seat. 2 of my favorite couches, by the way. And I picked those up as well on my way back to New Jersey, to Lakewood. And I remember dropping those off. I don't remember if anybody helped me move these things in. So I strongman 2 couches upstairs and over and around a railing in my new apartment to have couches in addition to all the rest of my stuff. And then I think the following day we had a basketball game on campus that I was there for. And then I know I had to get my U-Haul back by 4:00. And my colleague they were already doing something. So I remember I drove the U-Haul back and dropped it off on time. And then I had to walk back to my house, my apartment.
Oh my God.
And if you're familiar with like some parts of New Jersey, they don't have sidewalks. So I'm just
Side of a
walking
road.
down the road,
Hmm.
solo, just like contemplating what the fuck is going on with my life. But at that point in time, I had like a little bit of money. And so I was like, okay, at least I got some things going for me.
And kids, just for reference, this is in the time before Uber
Yeah.
and ride sharing. Yeah.
Right. It didn't really exist yet. And it's not like I could just like call
Hail
a
a cab.
cab.
Yeah.
I wasn't in an area where you had like a bunch of cabs either. So yeah, it was wild. And I remember slowly but surely building out like my apartment. You know, I was able to get an actual bed. I got my mattress off Craigslist, but I remembered that like I got like a sealed mattress.
So what was it that you think gave you the bed bugs?
So I think it was either one or 2 places. I either got the bed bugs from the couch that I got off Craigslist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the couch is, I don't know which couch, or I got it from could be 3 actually, or I got it from the wood pallets, or I got it from, might have just been, they were already in the apartment because it says that they could even like live in like electrical outlets, like crevices and that kind of stuff. Yeah. I remember that experience was like, it was a fucked up experience because I remember falling asleep on one of the couches after work. Just had the TV on. I'm just like fall asleep, and I woke up and I felt like I was getting bit by a mosquito. And I remember looking in the mirror in the bathroom, and I had on like tank top wife beaters they call them. I remember looking, and it was just like 3 lines of like bite marks
Ugh,
along
that's the classic.
along where where the shirt was.
That's a classic appearance.
And so I was just like, what the fuck? And kept thinking, I was like, there's not mosquitoes in here, is there? And every time I fall asleep, I feel like I was getting bit. And so I started doing research and looking into it and found out, oh, I probably have bed bugs. And then sure enough, I saw one and I remember I bought this little kit. This must have been like early Amazon, I guess. I bought this little kit and it had like a liquid mist that you sprayed, had a powder that you would like put up in the air and had like a heavier powder and whatever. I don't know. I just remember I bombed my apartment. And even when I moved out like 16 months later, there was still residue from that powder and shit in my apartment. But it killed them. It killed all them shits. And I remember like it was a battle. I remember waking up middle of the night, freaking the fuck out because I'm like, I'm getting bit while I'm trying to sleep and you can't sleep. But yeah, slowly but surely, I got those 2 couches. I think I got like some broken furniture that was either from Philly U or from the school I was working at. Like maybe an end table. No, 2 couches came with an end table. I remember I bought dresser, 2 dressers, I think. Bought a bed frame and box spring and mattress. And I also had to buy a coat rack because the apartment I had didn't have a closet. So I remember having to get a coat rack, lamp, that kind of shit. I didn't have a dinner table. And the layout of the apartment had a kitchen, had a bedroom with like an adjacent or attached bathroom, and like a living and dining room kind of put together combo situation. And that was it. Didn't have a washer dryer. I had to go down 2 blocks into like downtown Lakewood to use a laundromat. I could have got the bed bugs there too, but I don't think so. And then there was a grocery store that was also down in that same area. So early on, that's where I would go to do my laundry or food shop. And then I stopped going there because they had put cereal on the cereals I would get like on the bottom row. And then one day when I opened my cereal, and fortunately, something told me to look. I poured out, it was like some Raisin Bran Crunch. I poured it out and I looked in it. It was like caramelized somehow, but it was a dead bug in it.
Mm.
I was like, thank God I didn't eat this. I would have
God.
fucking lost shit. But yeah, that was my first experience moving in. And again, I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have anything. I was just waiting on my paycheck to clear. And then once it did, I started, paying and getting the things that, I needed. And I also never forget, I was in a long distance relationship with my ex that was in the UK. And that was within my first 2 years of graduating, we were still together. So my last 2 years in college and my first 2 years out. That was like our relationship. And I remember realizing how much money I was also spending on the relationship, whether it was, long distance calls and flights and like gifts and all that kind of other shit as well. And how much of an investment I was making into that. And obviously that it ended, but I was, in terms of like expenses and everything I was spending was going towards like either the relationship or like just shit that I needed for sustaining myself. And so it was like most months I was just like breaking even. So I was definitely living paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't saving anything.
Yeah.
But I remember I was also living at a point in time where I was like, I have money to get things that I want. So I remember I had like a PS3. I went out and got like a nice, not a massive, probably about the size of this one's here, like a 19 or 21-inch TV, flat screen.
Mhm.
I had cable. So I was living like a pretty decent life. And I remember I invited my homies over for the Super Bowl. Well, they came and slept on the floor. Yeah, and I remember we had like a whole like little powwow. We had gone out. There was like a club that was like in the area. And it was super lame in comparison to anything that we did in Philly, but we were all together. And I remember came back to my place, all crammed up in one car. And it was like, who's gonna sleep on the couch? Whatever couch is, who's gonna sleep on the floor? Like, obviously I'm sleeping on my bed. But it was funny. And I remember taking a picture of all of them, like in the apartment. And then when I left, I remember taking another picture of like, hey, you take a picture, make sure everything's cleaned out. But I just remember being like, damn, I didn't realize how big this space was. Because every place that I've been in since has been significantly smaller, at least when I lived on my own. And I was like, damn, that's pretty dope. But yeah, I didn't have anything. And I had to build it up very slowly, paycheck by paycheck. And then once that relationship ended, I was able to also realize that like, oh, I have like more money now to deal with
Mm-hmm.
or to have.
So we have about 5 minutes left. What would you say were your biggest takeaways or lessons learned or pieces of advice that you would give
Well, first of all, you're not the host.
to
Okay.
the kids?
I would say one is to have your support system. Build it up if you don't already have it. You're going to need help. You're going to need assistance. But if you don't have it, it's still possible. Just know it's going to be a lot on you. Like, you got to put in that work. And it's going to be a challenge. And it may not seem like it's fair. You may feel like me, instances and circumstances, but it's the why is because it's yours now. And you got to figure the fuck out. Like, make this shit happen. Don't make any excuses. You might experience some low points. That's part of your story, your journey, your road to adversity. But it's also let that feed your rationale and your reasoning. Let that be your motivation to make sure that every generation after you is better suited and better positioned so that they don't have to go through that. Like, like Jay-Z used to say, like, I sold rock so you wouldn't have to. Like, let this be the opportunity where you go through all the hardship so that the ones that come after you, your family that comes after you, doesn't have to.
We are not advocating for the kids to sell rock.
No, because Jay-Z said he already did that, so we didn't have to. He was our Jesus. He died on the cross for us.
No, stop.
He died for our sins. But yeah, that was a very difficult time, and I was homeless again after that too.
I don't have any takeaways. Okay.
Well, no, that was a whole 5 minutes. So if you can sum up your takeaways and
So rude.
go ahead, sum up your takeaways.
I'm not going to repeat any of yours because some of yours were some of mine. But I think to seek guidance from any like trusted adult, if you have any in your life. Like for me, I had, I didn't have parents. I had grandparents growing up. And at the point when I was moving, my grandfather had already passed away. And he was like the one really savvy with money and everything. I didn't have as much guidance, and I could have probably sought guidance from other resources, and I just kind of didn't. But I think so. In addition to that, the other thing is to see what else you can do. Like, what else can you fit into your life to try to make things work? So for me, I made things work by downsizing what I could have, by limiting it only to things I could get at Target because that was the only credit card that I had. So I just had to live the way that I was living until things settled, could only shop at Target. So whatever they had is what I could have. And that I had to live within that limit. And then the other thing I had to do was, even though I was in a training program and like I had this idea that like I shouldn't have to do anything else, like this is my track in life, like I'm not even going to pursue other employment options. I ended up Ubering, but that was just because I was lucky enough to have a car. So try to figure other things out, even if it doesn't seem to be along the path that you're on, because any legal income, again, we're not condoning selling rock, but
not at all.
Almost any income is good income.
It's a draw, by the way, so you can't even, that's not even a pursuable option anymore. Yeah.
So sometimes you have to go off your plan a little to make the current plan work. And that was kind of how I had to think of it with the Ubering thing. I think that's it. That's all I'm going to say within my time constraint.
I appreciate you.
I love you too.